started looking for a rental home when I turned 25. After some searching, I eventually discovered a lovely older home within my price range. I arrived first, so the house was mine, even though another man also desired it. I never had much furniture because I always shared a home with my parents. Moving was still more difficult than I anticipated. I spent the day unpacking and organizing my belongings. My bedroom closet construction project was the last thing I wanted to finish that night before it got dark. The downstairs was making a loud noise as I was working on the closet. My heart beat quickly. I believed that I was alone. I went downstairs to check cautiously, but other than a box that had fallen, there was nothing wrong. I guess that it might have fallen over due to the wind. After putting it back, I went upstairs to finish my work. I eventually finished constructing the closet. My bed's lights went out just as I was about to fall asleep. They wouldn't work when I tried to turn them back on. The same was true for my phone. There was no electricity. I had the uneasy feeling that something was wrong. I went downstairs to fix the power after grabbing the flashlight from my phone. I froze as I rounded the corner on the stairs. An all-black clad man was present in the kitchen. Without saying anything, he gave me a look. I was unable to speak or move. I was only able to wait. The man slowly closed the kitchen door before leaving. I just stood there, trying to make sense of what had just happened. After a while, I overcame my fear and hurried to the power panel. I flipped the switches back on with trembling hands, and the lights came on. I looked all over the house, but the man was nowhere to be found. After calling the police, I locked my room. When the police arrived, they failed to discover any proof of the man. I went to my parents' house for the night because I couldn't stay there by myself. I had the impression that the man had been watching me for some time. My friends suggested that it might be a joke or someone attempting to frighten me. I increased the number of locks and security cameras, but the feeling of being watched persisted. A few weeks later, I perceived someone trying to open my back door when I heard a noise in the middle of the night. My imagination did not cause it. The earlier incident came to mind immediately. I tried to get away from him, but he came back. He made another attempt to enter my home. His attempts didn't stop for 5 minutes. I managed to keep him out with my extra security measures, but the anxiety persisted. At home, I felt exposed and questioned why he chose to target me. I considered who might want to harm me, but I had no adversaries. The other guy who wandered the house was the only person I could think of. Perhaps he intended to frighten me, or worse. I was uneasy at the idea, but I didn't want to entrust a stranger with the care of my new home. Without any unusual occurrences, months passed. I'm hoping he gave up. Now that I feel safer, I can call this place my home. After I turned 19 and started looking for an apartment, my parents gave me a year. They desired that I develop independent living and self-reliance skills. I thought favorably of it. I was free to do whatever I wanted. I walked around until I found a cheap 10-unit apartment building, one of which was vacant. I thought it was ideal for my first house. 1 month after completing the paperwork, I moved in. I was excited as I entered my new apartment and a little uneasy as well. It was a warm place with a distinct appearance. What mattered was whether I liked it. As I didn't have many belongings, I was able to settle in rather quickly. I decided to work on side projects while relaxing in the living room. In the beginning, everything went okay. We would talk in the hallway, and the other places seemed to get along okay. But eventually, I saw this strange man in the hallway. He had a strange vibe and lived across from me. I could feel his eyes on me whenever we came into contact. Despite not calling it scary, I did call it unsettling. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't keep an eye out, especially when I was by myself in the building. The strangeness persisted. I could always hear the opening and closing of his peephole when I was standing outside my door. He appeared to be watching me all the time. However, I made an effort to maintain my composure and focus on getting accustomed to my new life. There was a knock on my door one evening as I was watching TV. The man from across the hall was there when I looked through the peephole. Darkness enveloped him as he stood there. He didn't answer when I opened the door and greeted him. Instead, he inquired about borrowing some of my butter, appeared sincere, but something didn't feel right. He had already left when I returned after returning it from the kitchen. When I rang his doorbell to deliver the butter, There was no response, which confused me and alarmed me. The door was kept locked. I turned to look, but he was gone. Undoubtedly, there was an odd sensation. I had a hard time getting over the strange occurrence as the day went on. I had the impression that someone was always watching me. Before going to bed, I made an effort to ignore it. I was awakened in the middle of the night by a noise in the room. When I turned to face the menacing figure waiting for me across the hallway, my heart began to race. He didn't move, casting unsettling shadows in the low light. I couldn't move because I was so terrified as I pondered how he had entered my apartment. Just before turning in for the night, I always locked the door. I was working on developing a defense when fear overcame me. He noticed I was awake and quietly left my apartment before I had time to gather my thoughts. I was sitting terrified on the couch. My right to privacy had been violated. This visitor had just casually entered my house. I immediately called 911, and shortly after that, the police arrived. When I gave the man the butter after he was arrested, he admitted to breaking into my apartment and running for cover. He had been watching me all evening, and when I realized it, shivers ran down my spine. I didn't know at first, but moving to a new place can be a little unsettling. I'm just a 30-year-old man trying to establish my own life. England gave off the impression of being a new beginning. It was like a dream realized when I came across an old mansion. That is the kind of opulent residence I've always yearned for. My own private castle. Since I had enough money to support myself, I signed the paperwork and moved in. After moving all my belongings into this incredible old house, I was exhausted. The best thing in the world appeared to be a quick nap. I collapsed into my bed, closed my eyes, and passed out because I had been lifting and organizing all day. I woke up to the light of the morning filling my room. When my stomach started to rumble, I realized I hadn't eaten since breakfast. Even as I dragged myself to the kitchen, I had a strange feeling. I had that sensation on the back of my neck, the one that says, "You're being watched." When I turned around, I saw a man standing there, which made me shiver. I could see him through the window as he was gazing directly into my home from the street. I squinted to see what he was doing. He didn't say anything. He just stared at me. It was ominous. I closed the curtains in an attempt to shoo him out. He eventually left, and I was relieved because I assumed he was just a nosy stranger. Putting this strange encounter aside, I returned to my bedroom. I quickly fell asleep after slinking under the covers. Then the silence was broken by a loud ring. I was only semi-awake when my eyes suddenly opened. It took me a moment to realize that it was a landline phone, which I was hardly familiar with using. I moaned as I stumbled downstairs to respond. When I picked it up, I could only hear labored breathing. When I said hello, I only heard more breathing. I slammed the receiver down out of frustration and fear as my heart raced. There was too much of this. However, it continued on. Once again, the phone rang, and I resisted the urge to answer it. "I'm waiting for you. Come downstairs," said a chilly voice. My blood froze in my veins. I crept downstairs holding a bottle of water for solace while pondering who and what this person was after. The floorboards squeaked as I walked across the first floor. The moment I noticed a man leaning against a window with a menacing grin, my heart began to race. I ran back upstairs, called 911, and they arrived right away because I was paralyzed by fear. However, the stranger had left only his footprints in the yard as evidence of his presence. However, the unease persisted. Weeks passed with no sign of the stranger. No more spooky phone calls or unsettling looks. However, I was unable to get rid of the feeling that I was being watched. A constant reminder of that terrifying encounter. The old mansion was full of creaks and shadows. My once dreamed house had changed into a gilded cage with mysteries I was unable to unlock. I'm haunted by the memory of that man and his menacing smile. So whenever I turn around in the mansion, I look behind me. In a place that used to be my haven, I'm entrapped in a state of uncertainty and paranoia.